Hey guys, Claire Chancellor here. I want to thank you for sharing your time with me through this conversation. I have just finished with a client who was exploring her connection to the ancient school of Isis. So, a connection to her healing gifts outside of time. In that session, oh, it was incredible with what came up and what shifted, and the magic and the synchronizations and everything that comes with it. I could tell from her experience that there was information that her soul was desperately wanting to know. And I can absolutely relate to that on my own healing journey. When I first started out connecting to past lives, star seeds, and multidimensional worlds, and my role and my purpose for having those experiences outside of time. Now, there's only so much I can talk about in a one on one session, so I thought, okay, there's that spark of inspiration. I will hit record. And some of the things that I'll share with you today are some of my deeper vulnerabilities, but I think it's fair to share how I got to this particular point where I seem to know a lot. And that's the truth is it's because I've explored a lot. So, where to start? It's a very good question. When I was little, had my parents, they were both married together, everything was fine until they moved to a particular property in Mont Albert that had a lot of, oh, dare we say, dark energy. In this particular home, when we moved into it when I was about 2 or 3 years old, there was some crazy stuff that would go on. There would be the washing machine that would turn on in the middle of the night. The piano would play in the middle of the night. My mum would put me in the bath when I was a bit older, not 2 years old, but a bit older and independent. And, you light the candles and you have the bubble fizz. And then I'd be sitting there and all the candles would blow out and there would be the windows and door closed. So, where did that breeze come from? The experiences there in that home continued to get dark, not very pleasant, very scary, very scary. And I could see spirits. I could see them gathered in the formal lounge room. I could see them in their 1920s outfits and hear the conversation. Those those ones who gathered in the formal lounge room, yeah, they were fine. Had no problem with them so much, except the room was always icy cold. But I did have problems with spirits standing outside the window of my bedroom, or if I'd go outside in the garden, at sunset, they'd be standing on the roof looking down. And yeah, as a child, it was incredibly isolating and alone because it looked like I was absolutely crazy. Maybe I was. However, the predictions that I was making also came true. So the phone would ring and I would be able to say to mum, oh, okay, that's Nana. And I was right. There were lots and lots of different unexplainable situations where my grandmother bought me a watch, an analog watch, and it would go backwards on me. Like you could seriously see the hands on the clock go backwards. So they returned that watch. I thought, oh, it's the watch, it's a faulty one. And they got another one, and then another one, and then another one. And at some point, someone said, like, okay, Claire does not wear watches. Like, she does not have a good relationship with time whatsoever. And so that's where I couldn't hide my gifts, right? I couldn't hide the fact that every time I would walk into a supermarket with mum, that the radios or go into a shop or something and they'd have the radio playing and suddenly the radio would go to like white noise. It'd be walk in and the electrical cash registers would crash, computers would crash, couldn't go near a mobile phone to save my life. Um, the Wi-Fi, gosh, when that started to show up in our day-to-day culture, having a mobile phone, Wi-Fi, high tension power lines, oh my gosh, I would get these splitting migraines from being anywhere near Wi-Fi type energy. And again, it was invisible, it was unexplainable, it was another tally on the board that Claire's crazy and different and weird and wonderful. And people were really uncomfortable when I said, like, I can come to the party or I can go to the thing, but please have your phone off. And people found that to be rude, but turning it on, and then I would just be, yeah, on my knees with like migraine like pain from the mobile phones. So learning to be human was not fun in any way, shape, or form. There was a stage there throughout my teenage years where I decided to turn off my connection to the spirit world to try to get some peace. And in fact, that went backwards. That's where I didn't have the gifts to tune in, tap into what was about to happen or where I needed to be or the guidance that I became reliant on. I've skipped a little bit of a step there. I also know that growing up with primary school, mum would say, like, hey, do you want to have some friends over after school? And I'd be like, no, thanks. The house is full of beings and spirit. Like, no, I don't need any more stimulation. So yeah, that's what happened when I got to school age and high school age and learnt that not everybody else was seeing spirit the way that I was literally seeing spirit. So that became strange to me to understand how people navigated life without just assuming they could tune in, tap into their guides. That was weird to learn that not everybody does that. And that, in fact, people want to know how to turn that on. It was like, well, you teach me how to be human. Uh, Teach me how you don't do it so I can teach you how to do it. So, yeah, things were, yeah, odd in my world growing up. When I did get to the stage of having children and wondering, will they also have those spiritual gifts? Yes, they did, but not to the extreme levels. And perhaps that was because I had nurtured the way that they connected to spirit. Some of my daughters are more emotional based in their gifts, and some are more visual in their gifts. However, it never went crazy like it was off the charts for me. When my mum had cancer as a teenager, the doctors had said, okay, well, maybe Claire's sensitivity and her issues with electromagnetic hypersensitivity, so allergic to electricity and Wi-Fi, maybe that was connected to the radiation that my mum had before she had me. Like maybe mum's eggs had been fried. So it came with a lot of experiencing different doctors, different modalities, naturopaths, homeopaths, kinesiologists, stand upside down, wear, grounding materials, Tesla plates, Bowen therapy, hypnotherapy, and nobody could solve it. The Wi-Fi, the sensitivity, all of that, nobody could solve it. I really had to avoid going to shopping centres and anywhere where people had their mobile phones. Um, and so, yeah, it put me on the quest to experience a lot of different modalities. The other one to take notice of is I also had extreme sensitivity to normal doctor type medicine. The body would just like, no, antibiotics didn't work. Anything else they prescribed didn't work. I really had to go down that path of Chinese medicine. So it was an interesting journey. On that path to clear the Wi Fi and to understand the spiritual gifts, I came across this brilliant man who didn't have any judgment when I said, hey, I've got this Wi Fi issue. Could you help me resolve and dissolve it? He's like, okay, I'm a hypnotherapist. If you think you're crazy, we could only make it worse. No, he didn't say that, but it was like, yeah, okay, let's see what happens. And by that time I'd seen that particular person, I had seen countless hypnotherapists. So I was very attuned to, how they worked. This particular hypnotherapist put me into a trance. He I had my eyes closed, and then he turned his phone on. It was like he didn't believe me when I said, like, I'm allergic to like mobile phones. I was in a trance. He turned his phone on, and whoa, the extreme pain the extreme blinding pain. He's like, oh gosh, she's not making it up. Like, no, I'm not. And so he had his own spiritual gifts where he could track back or take me back to past lives, multidimensional lives, back to where the sensitivity was coming from. He had taken me back to other starseed worlds where it appeared that I was being either monitored or tracked or like energy attachments, like like an aerial, like I was wide open to all sorts of energy coming in and disturbing my nervous system and everything that was connected to that. And from there, that one session of feeling protected, that one session of doing all sorts of different work with crystals and energy, that one session, and I had relief for the first time ever. First time ever. Like I like the migraines, the headaches, the sensitivity went away. It was like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Of course, we weren't done. There was other work to be done within that, within the hypnotherapy realms, within connecting to the higher guidance, connecting into dark energy, connecting into past lives where I had been in the dark energy. We had done all sorts of different work to clear out all of the reasons why. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. But we had cleared out all of these different levels, I should say, throughout all different dimensions, frequencies, and time. From there, that brilliant man had said, "Hey, with your gifts, like let me take you to mediumship class. Let me take you to circle." And that was breathtaking to be in a space where everybody else could see spirit. And I could try on the ways that they connected with spirit, like trying on shoes, like, oh, how do you do that? And learned about energy protection and boundaries, how to connect in with spirit, to have the discernment between the dark energy, the light energy. And it was just brilliant to be in a space where I belong. From there, I still was on that pursuit to better understand why or what my purpose was with spirit. And there's some interesting things that had come up that when you do mediumship, you start to learn how to protect yourself and put the bubble of light around you until such a point where you learn that actually the light's within, so you don't actually need protection. What you do need is to not go into those levels of fear because dark energy likes, misery likes misery. The dark energy would connect to me when I was in a fearful state. And instead of having to do a lot of work to cut cords and resolve and dissolve any heavy duty energy, it was far more effective to get me to be out of the fear state so that the dark energy couldn't attach because it wasn't a frequency match. And that put me on that path then to better understand why we do go into that fearful state. What was the purpose of being here on Earth? To be in a realm that has 3D, love, hate, darkness, lightness. Like what is Earth the way that Earth is? And yeah, that unpacked a whole lot of different understandings of why we have that human experience and why we have our spirit guides and why we are connected into our higher self. So instead of connecting in with spirit guides and loved ones in the spirit world, I soon learned to tune in, tap into my higher self. And the thing is, spirit guides, they've had past lives with you. They have their own agenda. They have their own soul contract. So spirit guides, yes, they're incredible. However, there's only so much guidance they can provide you through their lens compared to going up to your higher self to connect into your purpose and what it means for you to be here on earth. When I connected into my higher self and asked about Earth's origins, about, okay, well, why are people here? Yes, Earth is a unique school for the elite souls who are willing and ready to have that growth where they could only get the lessons here on Earth that they couldn't get in the spirit world. The spirit world tends to be a place where there's love and light and happiness and no time and joy. And that's the thing, when you've been connecting in with spirit, yeah, they always bringing in love and happiness and guidance. However, being here on Earth gave us the experience of being in a 3D body, gave us the experience of being in linear time, gave us the experience of polarity. So you could experience love and hate, justice, being right or wrong, the darkness and the light. Earth herself came with the polarities where the soul could learn about consequence, cause and effect. And again, these are things that you couldn't learn in the spirit world. So to have that mastery, it was incredible to be able to have put your hand up and come to Earth. And some may be saying here, okay, but what about the ghosts and the darker energy? They are not of the light. They are not of the spirit world. The darker energy, the ghosts, they have had a human experience where they have incomplete lessons, where there's injustice, and they stay between the realms. And so there's this darkness and this connection to Earth where their fear, their anger is keeping them here until somebody goes in and rescues that aspect or that soul. Yet they'll continue to haunt the human experience. And that if you are feeling like you're being haunted, again, you can definitely clear that energy. But a big part of it is understanding what caused you to drop your energy into fear and anything like that to be that match. Anyway, I digress. So when you look at Earth herself, she's put her hand up to be here within the solar system to create an experience for people's evolution. Well, not people's, for soul's evolution. She holds Akashic records. She holds all sorts of wisdom that can activate your DNA. There's all sorts of different technologies that Mother Earth has that by being here, you get the downloads, you get the understanding. I was just checking with the team, is anything more to say here about that? And so when you're here on Earth, connecting into that DNA wisdom to check in to know that your soul's growth is about experiencing the polarities. You can explore past lives where you've had heavy duty ego past lives, where you've let the power get the better of you, the manipulation, the dominant, the control. And you can also have past lives where you've come in, or even in this lifetime, being an incredible healer, empathetic, aware of people's emotions. Now, my experience with past lives was to go back to a time known as the ancient schools, which technically is outside of time, but I'm going to ignore that piece for now. And part of understanding why I was here on Earth was to go back to this particular time where my husband David was. We were back in the ancient schools where we were learning about how to bend time, how to manipulate reality, how to use sacred sexual healing, how to explore making portals using crystals, crystalline technology, all of the things. And as I went back into those ancient schools to learn about how we bent time, it started to make sense why watches were going backwards on me. When we went back and had a look at the way that you could play with the way people perceived reality, it was like, okay, that's a bit interesting how I was seeing ghosts back then. Every time we'd go back to the ancient schools to have a look at how we were using sacred sexual healing, it was like, right, that now makes sense with other challenges that I had had in human form. When we looked back to ancient schools, we could see how We were connected to crystals, opening portals, the illusion of time, time traveling, um, the way that we used plants and plant healing. It was absolutely incredible to start to make connections to how that related to being here on Earth in a human body. So, what I noticed back in that particular lifetime that stands out was being put on a particular altar. I had come in with my passport ticked off from other worlds. So, I'd explored Pleiades, Sirius, Arcturian, a brief experience of Orion. There were all of these different multi-dimensional worlds that I had been, that I had my passport ticked, I'd learnt, I'd explored, I'd integrated. And by putting me on the altar and then blending my energy with somebody else who had their passport ticked, it meant that the energy would kind of entwine and merge and open up portals in that room with the masters observing how the energy would move, how the crystals would activate and light up. And these portals would then open that would give us access to more gifts and streams of energy, streams of light, streams of knowledge, streams of mastery through other worlds. It was like we were there in a temple and we would create a portal to like the crystal world. And it was like, yeah, all of that incredible energy would stream through. And with that, we then could use that with healing, bringing light into people's organs. We could bring that into people's manifestation, bring that into people's minds in the way that they were perceiving reality so they could feel more grounded. There was all sorts of interesting things that was going on from opening up that space. We also learned in that particular space about being put into a sarcophagus and the healing arts with putting yourself into a meditative state for 40 days, 40 nights, and to again, to have that mastery away in the way that you would hold your density and also move outside of time, space, reality. So there was all sorts of astral traveling and things that were going on to look at how other people were doing things. The healing was incredible. There was another piece there with the. We also learnt in that space about the sacred sexual healing. So we were using the illusion of sexual desire versus knowing the truth. So they would put people to the test about trusting your intuition, trusting your truth, and then putting you through tests where would you let desire fool you? Would you let your desires fool you into giving your power away? All of these different things that we were learning about how to identify people's manipulative, fraud, illusionary, shape-shifting energies. It was quite fascinating. And they would also put us to the test to say, okay, well, if you're here in this temple, we need you to move to the next temple. And you would assume that you would go down a particular corridor where it was well lit and the columns and the pathway. And yet they were teaching us to have discernment, that that was the illusion of the ego, instead of noticing that there was this frequency, this invisible door to the left. And that was actually the thing that required you to, again, have that trust in your intuition, to be able to move where your mind had said that wasn't an option. We'd learnt about changing your frequency to be able to move through walls, and that the density was something that the mind would interpret as an obstruction when in fact it wasn't. This is where we learnt about raising really big heavy rocks, to ask the rocks to communicate with the rocks to lose their density, to be able to levitate and move those big rocks or any barriers like that. it was the mind that was making them look like a barrier and actually wasn't the truth of, yeah, it wasn't the truth of what was actually in front of you. And so these were the types of incredible learnings that we had in the ancient schools. And there's 13 different ancient schools. It starts with the ancient school of Anubis, and that's the school of the darkness, and then you move through to the ancient school of Isis and Horus and Ra and so on and so forth. So each particular school taught you a different gift, and you'd have to graduate to be able to get to the next level. I see this in clients a lot of times. Then they haven't allowed themselves to graduate. They embrace the sisterhood, or they embrace the desire to follow, instead of the responsibility to move on with what they have to take that to the world. So, yeah, there's a lot of different insights into your talents and abilities, what you bring to Earth, from your experiences, where you've had your passport stamped, what schools you've gone through. So, yeah, being here on Earth, bringing your gifts, your talents, raising the frequency. This is an incredible honor and a privilege to be here on Earth. One of the big reasons for people to bring their light in, they come in, they experience the heaviness, the darkness, to understand how their gifts help other people. And it's about pivoting and turning around the things that you fear, the things that bring your energy down, to have that freedom to express yourself, to express your gifts, to open up your heart space, to teach people how to reconnect back to their intuition. I know for myself, when I've taken groups through processes back to when their ancestors turned off their connection to their intuition and instead conformed to the mainstream. I've taken groups through processes where they have dialed down their connection to spirit because they had to conform to the 9 to 5 and the school system and everything else, that they were bullied to have those connections. Those talents, those gifts that everybody has, the connection to the light, is still there. However, they put these onion layers of fear, the shooting, the tolerating, everything over the top of that. And it's about shifting those, understanding why you took them on, and then shifting those to actually come back to the truth, the pure truth of your purpose and why you're here. And when you start to open up to that, that's when you have that pure lens of what you learned in other lifetimes, that you can stream in those healing gifts, those healing talents. And it's not because you have to do anything with it. Just being you is like being the crystal. It radiates that frequency that when people are in your company, they get it. They get the dose of healing. They don't need to do anything with it, or to meditate, or to journal. It's them having that activation that wherever they go, it's available to them and to the people around them. However, some people may also be on the journey to teach people what it's like to tune in, tap into that. So a big part of that is the polarity, to understand the darkness and the ego and the attachments and the fear, and how anytime you drop into fear, that's exactly what the darkness wants. Like that movie Monsters Inc. Anytime that you drop into a fear state, you become an energy battery for entities, demons, archons, anything that you can think of like that. So the goal isn't necessarily to raise your frequency. Sometimes the goal is actually to resolve and dissolve the connections that you got to fear, shooting yourself, tolerating, and then, and only then, is it about raising your frequency. Because if you raise your frequency before you do the other work, you come down very, very quickly. It can be a bit of a roller coaster for somebody's spiritual awakening. And that's where they start to get things like repeated illnesses, immune system issues, financial issues, because it's such a yo-yo up and down. So a lot of people's journey is, again, to notice that the light is within them. Anywhere where the light got shut down, closed off, made into woo woo, all of that. Yeah, you have to go and resolve and dissolve that so that you can then raise your frequency and elevate and help other people amplify their incredible gifts too. So, hopefully, this has given you a bit of an insight into the journey that you are on, a bit where you can take it. Of course, we all have our own unique experience with the spirit world. You may have the frequency that's not a time traveler but something else, and so you have a different path. But from what I've known from the people that I work with, I know that my purpose, I do know this, I do know that my purpose is to help the graduation class, those who are on that path to raise their frequency. Like we've done this time and time again, guys. Like the the spaceship's going. We have to finish this. We have to graduate. We have to move. Going on to the next one. They're the type of people that I work with, and it's like, yep, time to resolve and dissolve anything that's been holding you back, so you can step into that magnificent light. And then we've got another mission to complete. All right, well, thank you for listening and being part of this conversation. I'm sure there's other different layers and things I could have shared with Atlantis, Lemuria, dragons, everything in between. But for now, I'll leave that with you, and I trust that that's given you a bit of an aha into your own spiritual awakening. I'll talk to you later.